History doesn't just repeat, it rhymes. In 1944, at a quiet hotel in New Hampshire, the Western world did something unprecedented. They agreed. They built the IMF, the World Bank, and the US dollar-centric system that has governed your life, your savings, and your country's trade for 80 years. But fast forward to 2026, and that unity is no longer a given. Today, the Atlantic Alliance is facing a structural identity crisis. While Washington and Brussels still share a language of values, their economic interests are moving in opposite directions. The US has pivoted toward aggressive protectionism, fueled by a 2025 wave of tariffs that didn't just target China, they hit Europe. While the G7, the traditional engine of the West, is projected to grow by a sluggish 1.1% this year, the challenger on the horizon is moving 3 times as fast. If the US and the EU cannot align, they aren't just losing a trade war, they are handing over the keys to the global engine to a group of nations that have spent the last decade waiting for this exact moment of discord. Welcome to the Nexus Journal. Today, we unravel why the fragmentation of the West is the ultimate gift to China and the expanded BRICS bloc. The fracture began where most modern conflicts do, with energy. For nearly 70 years, from 1953 to 2019, the United States was a net energy importer. It shared a common vulnerability with Europe. Both were fellow shoppers at the global energy counter, dependent on the same volatile pipelines and sea lanes. But today, that shared reality is gone. The US is now a net total energy exporter, while Europe remains an industrial giant on life support. Following the trade shocks of 2025, the US began using its energy dominance as a lever of diplomacy, rather than a shared resource. At the recent Davos 2026 summit, the divide was laid bare. The US sees energy as leverage. Europe sees it as sovereignty. While American factories benefit from domestic shale, German industrial output, the traditional engine of the Eurozone, is struggling with a growth forecast of just 0.9% for 2026. This energy divorce is the first crack in the Atlantic Foundation. The second is the rise of the parallel plumbing. While the West is busy building trade barriers against one another, the expanded BRICS Plus, now including powerhouses like Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, and Egypt, is building a bypass. As of early 2026, the BRICS Plus bloc represents 36% of global GDP, officially eclipsing the G7's 30%. They are no longer just a symbolic club, they are a commodity superpower, controlling 40% of global oil production. But the real threat isn't just what they produce, it's how they pay for it. China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, has expanded with a speed that has caught the West off guard. By January 2026, over 180 countries have integrated with the renminbi-backed system, allowing them to settle trade while bypassing the dollar-dominated SWIFT network entirely. For the first time in the post-war era, the US dollar's share of global reserves has begun to face a meaningful erosion of trust. Not because the dollar is weak, but because it has become a weapon that many nations, even some within Europe, are becoming afraid to hold. The result is a world that is no longer bipolar, but fragmented. China is not looking to win a direct war. They are waiting for the West to disempower itself. By 2025, China secured a near-total grip on the critical mineral supply chain, owning the majority of the world's lithium and rare earth processing. If the US and EU cannot align on a unified industrial policy, they aren't just facing a rising China, they are facing a future where they must buy the 21st century's most essential technologies from a bloc they can no longer contain. The nexus of global power is shifting from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific, not by force, but by default. If the Atlantic Alliance remains a house divided, fighting over tariffs, energy costs, and digital sovereignty, the New World Order will not be built in Washington or Brussels. It will be built in the boardrooms of Beijing, Riyadh, and New Delhi. History doesn't just repeat, it rhymes. And right now, the rhythm of the West is falling out of sync. This fragmentation isn't just a policy debate. It is a physical reconfiguration of the planet's trade routes. While the US and Europe argue over the fine print of carbon taxes and digital privacy, China is finalizing the most ambitious project in human history: the physical integration of Eurasia. Under the Belt and Road 2.0, Beijing has moved beyond just building roads. They are building connectivity monopolies. In 2025, the completion of the high-speed rail corridor connecting Southeast Asia to southern China changed the economic gravity of an entire continent. Today, it is faster and cheaper for a merchant in Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur to trade with Shanghai than with Los Angeles. This is the Middle Kingdom strategy in action. China is positioning itself as the indispensable hub, while the West becomes a collection of isolated islands. But the shift goes deeper than logistics. It has moved into the very bedrock of the future economy: the battery hegemony. Consider the lithium triangle of South America and the massive cobalt deposits in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As of 2026, Chinese state-backed firms control roughly 65% of the global processing capacity for the minerals required to power every electric vehicle, smartphone, and advanced weapons system on Earth. The West is attempting to de-risk by building its own supply chains, but they are decades behind. For every $1 billion the US invests in domestic mining, China is spending $10 billion to lock down the global bottleneck points. If the US and the EU cannot agree on a joint investment strategy, a Marshall Plan for critical minerals, they will find themselves in a state of technological vassalage, where their green transitions are entirely dependent on the permission of Beijing. Meanwhile, the New World Order is finding its political voice through the expanded BRICS. This is no longer an anti-Western alliance, it is a post-Western one. The inclusion of Saudi Arabia and the UAE in 2024 wasn't just about oil, it was about capital. By early 2026, the BRICS New Development Bank has begun issuing orbital bonds, a new class of debt that allows developing nations to fund infrastructure without the strict, often politically charged conditions of the IMF. For a nation in the global south, the choice is becoming stark. On one side, you have a fragmented West that is increasingly protectionist, expensive, and prone to using its financial system as a tool of punishment. On the other, you have a BRICS Plus bloc that offers non-interference and a seat at a new table. The danger for the West is not a sudden collapse, but a gradual provincialization. If Washington and Brussels continue to treat each other as rivals rather than an integrated economic fortress, they will wake up in a world where the Atlantic is no longer the center of the map. They will be two wealthy, aging peninsulas on the edge of a massive, vibrant Eurasian-African trade zone that has learned to live without them. The nexus is here. The rhyme is clear. In 1944, the world converged because it had no other choice. In 2026, the world is diverging because the alternatives have finally arrived.